Welcome back to Drafting with Mark, and in this video we're going to do a continuation of this cooktop that we created. So if you haven't seen me draw this one, go ahead and watch that video. I'll try to link a card up here in the top right, and I'll also leave this first video in the description. Alright, so we're going to switch over to AutoCAD, and once again I've already created the 2D portions here. And we're going to also do this, we're going to put it on a title block, and we're going to also put this in paper space. Okay, so we have this created, and what I'm going to do is just start off by creating some layers here. Let's go up to the layer properties. And then we're going to create our common layers that we normally going to have. So I'm just going to click on the new layer icon, which is located here. And I'm just going to type in all of them here. So I'm just going to do a hidden layer. Next one, let's do a center layer. And we're going to do a dimension layer as well. That's going to be this dimension one here. And I'm just giving them shorthand or 3-letter names for them. And let's see, what else are we going to need? I don't see any sections or things of that nature on here, but I will need a title block one. So I'm just going to name that one TB. And then I'll add one more here, and I'll call it a border layer, right? All right. So those are going to be the layers that I should need to create this. Now I'm going to give them some colors, and then I'll put the line types on them. So I know here on the border one, I don't want this one to print. So this is one of the things I commonly do, is that I don't want this to be plotted. So I'm just going to click on this little icon here. All right, so that's just going to stop it from plotting. The next thing I'm going to do, let's go ahead and assign some colors to this, right? So around the border, let's go ahead and make that a maybe magenta. That's what I'm thinking about for this one. So let's go ahead and make it color number 6. The title block, let's go ahead and make that a blue. So we'll make that a color number 5. And that's one of those colors that will show up. I'm going to try to stay away from the greens and the yellows because they don't show up too well, especially with the white background. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the center one. Let's go ahead and make center a red color. And also, let's go ahead and make the dimension lines. Let's go ahead and make those a blue as well. And then finally, with my hidden ones, let's go ahead and make it, since we're going to have both of these line types the same, let's go ahead and make it red. All right, one of the next things I'm going to do is let's go ahead and adjust the line type. So a center line, let's go ahead and go to line types. So I'm selecting on this icon here. I meant to select on the one that says continuous. So let's go ahead and select the line type, go to load. I'm going to scroll down in this window until I find center. I'll hit OK. And then when I'm here, I'm going to select center and hit OK. That should change that one to the center. Let's go ahead and find the hidden one. So I'm going to select the hidden one where it says continue. Go to load. Scroll down till I find the hidden. Go ahead and select OK. And then I'm going to select hidden and then select OK. All right. And I can make a hatch layer. Now that I'm thinking about it, but I'm just going to leave it alone. I'll put the hatch on the 0 layer, and that should be fine. Now I'm going to add a couple of more of these just so I can distinguish. I'm going to have a cooktop layer, an eye layer, and a knob layer, right? So those are going to be the components that I'm going to have. So I'm going to make component layers. So this one is going to be the cooktop. Then we're going to create another one, and let's go ahead and call that the knob, K-N-O-B. And then finally, I'm going to have the eye, E-Y-E. All right. I'm just going to leave those. They're all on red right now. Let's go ahead and change that up just a little bit. The cooktop can be on red. Let's make the knob a different color. And once again, I'm trying to stay with those primary colors. I know it's kind of a boring drawing, but let's go ahead and make that a blue. All right, so the knob is blue, the cooktop is red, and things of that nature. Okay, that should be all the layers that I'm going to need. Let's go ahead and close this. And then let's go ahead and start putting some of this stuff on layers, right? So I'm going to select my cooktops here. And then I'm going to put them on the cooktop layer. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of my eyes. I'm just going to use a nice big window. And I'm going to select all of my eyes that are located here. Let's go ahead and put those on the eye layer. I'm going to zoom into here. And this one is going to get a little bit tricky, as I'm going to put a window around here. And I'll go ahead and put them on the eye layer. And I just now noticed some. I'm seeing these dotted lines appear. Let's go back to the layer properties, and I didn't check and see. Yep, and I see that they are on the hidden layer. Let's go ahead and put the cooktop back on the continuous layer. As well as the eye, I'm going to put it on the continuous layer. And then the knob as well, I'm going to put that on the continuous layer. Alright, let's go ahead and close this, and that should have fixed all of our problems on that. Okay, with these knobs, remember that we left those as blocks. So when I go to select these are kind of like rectangles. So I'm just going to select these here. And then I'm going to select in the drop down here and go ahead and put those on the knob layer. And we're going to do the same here. So I'm just going to do a window, come around and select those. And let's go ahead and put them on the knob layer. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and scale this down. So remember that we created this in millimeters, and we want to put this on a English US title block, right? We want to use imperial units. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to scale these down by a factor of 1 divided by 25.4. So let's go to the scale command. Let's highlight all of this. Go ahead and hit enter. I'll select this as my base point. And we're going to type in 10 divided by 254. So remember, all I'm doing is just moving that decimal place. Once I do that, I'm just going to zoom the extents by selecting this icon here. And now we have this ready to go. So next, let's go ahead and put our center marks on here. Remember that if we want to use these, we're going to have to set this up and use some commands first. So I'm going to type in center EXE in this case, which should be fine at 0.12, and I always like to go ahead and check this, and I'm going to leave this at 0.12 because we are going to use these English or imperial units. The next one I'm going to use is center layer command, and what this command does is it just tells me to automatically put, when I use the center mark in the center layers, go ahead and put them on that layer. And if I'm not mistaken, we named this one called Sin. Alright, now let's go ahead and put our center marks on here. So I'm going to go to center mark, and I'm just going to start selecting these circles. Now you see that these are going to be a little bit smaller than what I need. But for what I need right now, I'm going to leave them the way they are. And I'll adjust them here in a second. Alright. So now that I have all of these labeled, I'm going to go ahead and select these 4, and then I'm going to go to the properties window by right clicking and selecting properties. And when I look into the property window, you can see that the extension of these is 0.12, right? So let's go ahead and make these a little bit bigger, and I think if I make it like 0.5, let's see how that looks. And I can kind of get a preview here and see if that's too big or too small. That's going to be a little bit too big for my taste. Let's go ahead and make it maybe 0.375. And we're going to do that with all of them. 0.375, 0.375, 0.375. Alright, so that's kind of a quick way to get all of those extensions to do what I want them to do. Let's go ahead and create the ones that are down here. We're going to use the center line to do those. So I'm going to go to center line, and I'm going to select these two opposite ends. And I'm just going to keep using this command to create all of my center lines that are running through here. I'm just going to hit the enter button on my keyboard. That way I don't have to keep jumping back up there at the top and selecting. Let's go ahead and zoom in and take a look at these as well. And I'm going to use that same command I just got through using, is the center layer one. Once again, I'm just hitting the enter button to take me back to the last command. And once I do that on all of these, we should be good to go. Alright, so you see now that I have all of these center lines and all of this stuff done, let's go ahead and take a look at this one, right? So you can see that these are named center lines, right? The benefit of doing this is that I can control all of these center lines, right? Just by selecting them all, and then I can modify them all. What I mean by that is I'm just going to start by putting a window around all of these. I'm going to go to my properties window, or you can right click and select properties, either one will work. Once I have this, in the selection drop down, I'm going to select the word center line. Now that's only going to let me deal with the center lines that are located here. And like I did before, let's go ahead and extend these up, maybe 0.25, and see what they look like. So now you can see that I get a little bit more length out of those. And which is kind of fine for what I need on these. If you want the little center lines to show up on these, I can do that now. But I think I'm going to wait till when I take a look at them into paper space, right? Alright, so this is all that I need to do in paper space, in model space. So I have the part created, I have my center marks on here. Everything else I need to do is going to be happening into the model space, right? Into paper space. Let's jump to the layout tab. So I'm going to go to layout 1. I'm going to go ahead and start by creating a rectangle. So I'm going to go to home, rectangle. I'm going to type in the lower left corner, which is going to be 0, 0, enter. And then I'm going to put in the size of this one. And this is 17, 11. Let's go ahead and zoom the extents on this. And then I'm going to offset this to the inside, right? Let's go to offset. Let's give it a distance of 0.25. And then let's offset this to the inside. So select the square here and then select on the inside. Alright, the inside one, let's go ahead and put that on the title block layer. And then the ones on the outside here, I'm just going to put on the border layer. Alright, so that is done. I also like to make my border layer hidden, but in this case I'm going to leave it the same. That's fine for what it needs to be. Let's go ahead and zoom the extents. And now we're going to adjust this price to make it fit. And the way we do that is if you go to the layout tab here, and I'm selecting up here, and I'm going to go to page setup. That should give me a dialog box where I can adjust this at. I'm going to go to modify. Once I have modify here, I'm going to select in the drop down, and I'm going to go find DWG to PDF. I'm going to change this to ANSI full bleed 17 by 11. I'm going to tell it that I want the extents. I'm going to tell it that I want to center it. And then I'm going to leave this set to 1 equals 1. Alright, so there's the money right here. Is leaving this set to 1 equals 1. Go ahead and hit the OK button. If you want to change it to monochrome, that's kind of an optional step here. But I can leave it set to none. I'll go to OK. You can see the whole thing should light up. And there I have my shape, right? Now, what I would advise you to do is to kind of move these three in a good orientation. Now, I can also set these up and have them have individual viewports for them. But if you're going to have all three of these shapes, it's okay to leave them as long as you have them laid out the way that you want them. Let's go ahead and extend our viewport here a little bit by selecting it and making it just a little bit bigger. Double click on the inside of your viewport. So you can see that I got a bold line going around it. Let's click on the extents button here. And then I'm going to come down here and start adjusting the scale, right? So remember that we're dealing with inches scales. Let's see what, and you can see that that is super small. Let's go ahead and use a, let's try 1 equals 1. You can see that is still too small. The one thing I do like about using the layout here or in paper space is that I can adjust these on the fly. And you can see that it adjusts rather easily. And hopefully this thing is not too small, right? And it looks like we're going to go all the way to 6 equals 1, huh? Okay. And that should be good enough for us, right? So we have a 6 inches is equal to 1, which is perfectly fine for here. That should give me a scale factor of 2, right? Let's go ahead and double click on the outside of here. I'm going to kind of close down my viewport a little bit. So I'm just going to bring my viewport in just a little bit. Now, I also do have a lot of real estate around here. If I want to tighten this up a little bit more, I think I might do that. That is a lot of real estate. Let's go ahead and open this back up. Click on the inside of your viewport. And I'm going to come down here and take a look at what the 1 equals 1 looks like. All right. So 1 equals 1 is a little bit too big. So now I'm going to show you how to do a custom scale here, right? So this is set to 1 equals 1, but I want to scale this to something that is a little bit smaller. So I don't want it to be 2 and I don't want it to be 1. So I'm trying to think of a number that's right in between both of those. Number I can think of is a good 1.5, right? So here's one of those kind of sneaky options here. I'm going to go to zoom by typing in Z enter, right? And then I'm going to type in scale, right? So I'm going to type in 1.5. So I'm typing in whatever scale I want it to be, but here's the kicker here. I have to put in XP behind it in order for it to apply to the paper space. So I'm going to type in zoom, and then I'm going to type in what scale I want, and then I'm going to follow that by XP. And what I want you to do is also take a look at what's going to happen here when I hit enter, right? So I'm going to hit enter. And you can see that this number do adjust to 1.5. And actually I meant to go smaller. All right, but that's no problem. We can go back to zoom by hitting Z enter. I'm going to type in 0.75 XP. And then I'm going to hit enter. And you can see that that 0.75 is actually what I need to do. Now I'm just going to pan this over. I'm not hitting the scroll or anything of that nature. I'm just panning this over. I'm making sure that I keep that, and that's exactly what I want it to be. Now I'm going to double click on the outside here, and then I'm going to go ahead and adjust this over a little bit. All right, so that looks perfect for what we're going to need here. Let's go ahead and take a look at the dimension style here, and then we'll start putting our dimensions on here, right? So let's go to dimension style, and the easiest way to get there is go to D, or you can come back to the Home tab. Underneath the annotation, when you see the drop down here, I'm going to select this icon here. Once the dimension style dialog box comes up, it doesn't matter if we're using paper space, which one of these we use. I'm just going to go to modify. Once I'm here in modify, I'm going to adjust the text height. So the text height, I'm just going to make it 0.125, which is fine for what we need. Underneath our primary units, everything is sitting at 2 decimal spaces, right? But remember, that's going to be 2 decimal spaces when we're talking about in millimeters. I don't want it to show up in millimeters. I want this to be inches, right? So instead of using my normal inches things, let's go ahead and use fractions this time. So let's kind of put it to a more practical approach, is what we're going to see here in the United States. So if I want somebody to measure this out in fractions, I want my fractions not to be horizontal, not to be diagonal. I just want them not stacked. So I'm just going to leave them spaced out this way. My precision is setting at a 1/16 of an inch, which is pretty common if I'm going to make this kind of part. Then I'm going to go to my alternate units. I'm going to tell it to display the alternate units. I'm going to tell it to go below them, and then I have a scale factor of 25.4, right? Now in this case, I do have 2 decimal places, which is totally fine for what I need on my millimeters. If I want to suppress that trailing 0, I can use this option here. But I think I'm going to leave them all with the 2 decimal places behind them. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to the text. And let's see, the one that I was looking for, nope, it was underneath text. Underneath this offset from dimension line, I'm going to close this gap in between here. So let's go ahead and make this number, let's say 0.4. And that looks good. So 0.04 is fine. So 0.04, go ahead and hit OK. Then go to close. All right, so my dimensions are set up now. Let's go to the annotation tab here, where it says use current. Select the drop down, And then I'm going to select my dimensions to automatically come on a dimension layer for me, right? So I'm going to go ahead and apply that one. And then I'm going to start dimensioning this, right? Let's go ahead and use a linear dimension. And I'm going to place my linear dimension here. And you can see that it did give me the right size of this. Let's go ahead and hit the enter button. And then let's do our dimension here as well. Now you can see sometimes my viewport here wants to get in the way. But remember that we can go ahead and put this on the layer so we can turn it off. So I'm just going to go ahead and select my viewport. I'm going to go back to the Home tab. And then I'm going to place it on the border layer. And then what I'm going to do with the border layer, for right now, I'm just going to turn off the border layer since we don't need to see that. Alright, let's go ahead and continue doing some dimensions on this, right? So I'm just going to use a linear dimension. I'm going to zoom into here to get you a better view. Let's go from this endpoint down to that endpoint, and then I'm going to place that dimension here. Underneath the annotation option, I'm going to use the continue. Then I should be able to select my next dimension, this one here, and then this one here. Okay? So now that I have this one dimension, I can also put another dimension on this one. It depends on how you want to do this. Either I can label my dimensions on here for my eyes and knobs, or I can go ahead and place them on these other views here at the bottom. That's going to be strictly kind of up to you on how you want to do your dimensioning. There's no kind of major rules on how you dimension things, but there is definitely some wrong ways, right? But I'm just going to add one more linear dimension on here just to kind of clean this up for my other view, right? So I'll put a linear dimension here, and now this is all satisfy my knobs, right? As far as my eyes here, let's go ahead and put those dimensions here along the bottom. So let's go from that endpoint to here. I'm going to use the continue option, and then I'm going to place that one here. Likewise here, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to start off with a linear dimension. I'll place it from this endpoint to that center mark here. I'm going to keep it in line with this one, so I'm just going to come over here and I'm going to touch this endpoint. That'll give me my tracking here. Once I get the tracking, I'll left click. I'll go to continue. Then I'll place my dimension here. Alright, one other thing that I need to do is I need to place how tall my cooktop is. So I'm just going to use a linear dimension from that endpoint to this one. I'll go ahead and place it here. Alright, now for my eye dimension, our detail, and my knob detail, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the Layout tab. I'm going to come here and then I'm going to find where it says rectangular. I'm going to create a viewport here. And then what I'm going to do in here is I'm just going to zoom in to one of my eyes here, right? I can see that that scale is sitting at close to 1. So let's go ahead and see what a 1-to-1 is. And that looks totally fine to me. I'm just going to double click on the outside here. And then I'm going to go ahead and adjust my scale. Or I'm going to adjust my viewport, sorry. Alright, let's go ahead and kind of make this a little bit bigger. Likewise with my other one here at the bottom, I'm just going to go back and create another rectangular one. I'm going to kind of keep it about the same size as this one since I already know what I'm going to create. I zoom into this viewport here and I'm going to double click on the inside of this viewport. And then I'm going to come and find this one, right? I'm going to go ahead and adjust the scale of this one since I already know what I want it to be. It's going to be the 1. That's what I need to see. And inside of this one, let's go ahead and hide this cooktop layer, right? So underneath, back at the Home tab, and you notice that I still have this viewport activated since it's bold. I'm going to go in the drop down here. I'm going to find the one that says cooktop, and then I'm going to select this one. I want to freeze that in this viewport, right? So when I select that one, you're going to see the cooktop should disappear. Alright, now it looks like I accidentally scrolled with my mouse wheel there. Let's go ahead and put this back on 1. And it says, come down here, and it's 1 to 1. There we go. Gonna move this over. Double click to the outside. And it looks like I accidentally, and that's kind of one of the problems you're going to have with both of these viewports on top of each other. Let me double click on the outside here, and that'll make sure I'm outside of that. One other thing I should have done, and I'll do this and make sure that I don't make that mistake again. Double click on the inside of this big viewport here. And with this viewport, I'm going to go ahead and lock it. And that's a real nice thing to do. So once I have this, no matter what happens, it'll be locked, right? So that way I don't make that mistake again. If I double click out here and then I select these two viewports, likewise, I'm going to go ahead and lock them. All right, let's double click here. I'm going to move these and make sure that they're in line with each other, right? So I'm just going to use a regular move command. I'm going to select this viewport, go ahead and hit enter. And then I'm going to select this endpoint here and place it at this endpoint. And then I'm just going to move that down, right? So I'm going to go to move, select this, enter. I'll pick a base point somewhere out here. As long as I'm coming straight down, let's go ahead and turn our ortho on. We'll keep that in line. All right. So from here, I can go ahead and start putting my dimensions back on. So I can go to dimension. Let's go ahead and add some dimensions going across here. And once again, if these viewports start to bother you again, once I have this all set up, I can select both of these viewports, select it in the drop down, and if I put them on the border layer, it should turn them off. And now I can keep going with my dimensioning, right? So I'm just going to keep adding my dimensions. You know, all the relevant stuff that you are going to see that I'm going to need on here. And I know I probably won't be able to get all of these dimensions on here, or I can make it a little bit bigger if I want to, just to show you all of these dimensions. But that should be, I think that's enough for this one here. And then all the other dimensions here I'm going to need is going to be radial or diameter dimensions. So let's use diameter. So we have a dimension here. I'm just going to hit the enter button just to kind of speed through some of these. Let's go ahead and put the linear dimension back on here just to show you the thickness that's located on here to here. And then I'm going to give you a reference dimension here. Let's see. Let's tell it that it's this tall. And sometimes you'll have some dimensions that cross over into your object. It's easier sometimes just to select it and kick it to the outside, right? Okay, so that's kind of all the dimensions that I'm going to need just to adjust this one. And then let's go ahead and put our knobs on here, right? So like we did before, let's go to the layout tab. Let's go ahead and find rectangular. Go ahead and select the rectangle here. Let's go ahead and zoom into this viewport and then double click. And then I'm going to zoom into this guy here. You can see that that 0.75 would probably work a little bit better, or I can get it a little closer than that because 1 is here. Let's go ahead and make this a little bit bigger. So that trick that we did before, let's go to Z, enter, so zoom. I'm going to type in 1.5 XP just to make this a little bit closer. I'll double click on the outside here. And then what I'm going to do is just kind of adjust my viewport, right? Make my viewport just a tad bit bigger. All right. And likewise, let's go ahead and make another viewport. So I'm going to go back up to rectangle and kind of make it the same size by tracking off of here. And that looks like a perfect candidate for one I can use. As I can zoom into here, Z, enter, 1.5 XP. All right. Kind of move this over and adjust it. While I have this one highlighted, I'm going to go to the Home tab. I'm going to go down and find Cooktop. And I'm going to hide that one in this view, right? So I'm going to freeze it. No need to see that. And then I'm going to select by double clicking out here. I'll go ahead and select both of these. Let's go ahead and lock them. And then we can adjust the viewport, right? All right. And lastly, let's make sure that this stays in line with the other one. So I'm just going to move this viewport. I'm using the move command, select there. I'm going to place these two endpoints on top of each other. And then I'm going to move this down. Let's go ahead and turn the border layer off. So I'm going to select these two and go ahead and place them on the border layer. Now you can see that these center marks are not showing up on here. There's a command where I can use a regen all, and it's REA. And when I hit enter, it's going to regen everything, right? For some strange reason, it's not giving me my little plus in between here. So I can select this one. I can right click and go to properties. And inside of the properties, if you want to look for scale line type, if I make this number a little bit smaller, let's see, I should be able to get to what I want. So 0.75, and you can see that will appear. All right, so I'm going to double click on the outside. Let's go ahead and put a few dimensions on this one, and we're almost done with this. So go ahead and put our dimension here. And then throw a couple of diameter dimensions on the top. All right, so the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to adjust and get these little pluses out of here. That was one of the things that I didn't do. So I'm going to go to my dimension style, select here. And underneath the standard, let's go to modify. And then we're going to go to the, should be lines and the arrows. Okay, symbols and arrows. Let's go ahead and change that to none. Okay, and close, right? And that should get rid of all those little pluses throughout the whole entire drawing, right? And then there's some other things that you can do on this one. You can label these and just call it like eye detail and knob detail and front view elevations and all of that stuff. But for what we need in this drawing, this is absolutely perfect, right? So we were able to create the dimensions. Remember that we created this first part. A super huge benefit is putting things on layers. So I think that's about more or less what I need. If you got any questions or comments on this one, please leave them down below. I hope you enjoyed watching this one, and if this is stuff that you like to see me do, hey, stick around. I'll keep coming up with something else. And until the next video, and thank you for anybody that's subscribing and stuck with me this long. You deserve it.